When everything we consume is the worst thing ever by some mouth breather on the internet, how is anything truly the worst thing ever? Time for the only podcast to officially create a list of the worst movies ever made. The only one. For real. Worst movies ever.
Worst movies ever. Here we are with another episode of Worst Movies Ever, and I gotta admit, at times, I have thoughts of just bringing on movies I generally like instead of just going for stuff that I think most people would perceive to be bad movies. And today, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite directors of all time, Dario Argento. In his catalog, and I think even just the most loyal Argento apologists would say he has peaks and valleys. Some people would say they're all valleys, and some people would say they're mostly peaks. But if we're honest and we look at his filmography over the years, there's no doubt that there's a drastic shift in tone after he made Phenomena. There is a period where I don't know if it was a matter of Western finance influence, a dip in quality assurance that we got known to watch in his movies. And I'm sorry if I'm speaking like an idiot. It's fucking -3 degrees here this morning, and I'm an Iceman, but bear with me. There's definitely not the same level of quality that we came to know from Argento with Suspiria and Deep Red and the Animal trilogy and all of this stuff once we reach a certain point like the 90s. And he made a comeback in the 2000s in a way where he decided to revisit an old genre of work he used to do, which was the Giallo. And for those of you out there, and I don't want to go on and on about this because I think the majority of the people that listen to my podcast know what a Giallo is. It's an Italian murder mystery based off of the old novels that used to come up, the pulp novels. And Giallo is the Italian term for yellow. And those novels used to have yellow bindings or yellow covers. So they were very well known, and it became a genre of film from Italy that was basically there was some murder mystery happening and the police had to solve it before the murderer striked again. And when Argento started his career, it's the majority of what he did for like the first 4 films. And then he took a drastic change into the supernatural and the fantastic. Even though those elements of the fantastic and the supernatural were there in the earlier work, they were just much more straightforward police procedural murder mysteries that were heightened with Dario Argento's like complete excess with visuals, with audio, and with violence. So when he decided to come back after a little bit of a break with Sleepless and some of the other stuff, he went back to what he knew and what he started with, which was the jolly genre. And there's a lot of mixed opinions as to whether or not he was successful with any of these movies. I tend to, and maybe, as I said before, I'm a bit of a Argento apologist because he's one of my favorite directors of all time. There's just really nothing like a Dario Argento film out there. I tend to like all these, but a lot of people kind of thought they were all lesser work, like Sleepless and Trauma and The Card Player and Do You Like Hitchcock? In movies like this, that when 2001's Giallo, the movie we're going to be talking about today, which for some reason when I watched it on Tubi, which looks really nice and sounds really nice, definitely a good way to watch it if you don't mind the ads that pop up quite frequently. I was really surprised how many ads were in this on this screening. Pardon me. I have to have my morning Coca-Cola. Let me take a drink. Oh man, I needed that so bad. When he came back to it, this usually is pointed at as the beginning of the end, even though I would argue his rendition of Phantom of the Opera, which he made before this, is clearly his worst work. It's a mix up between the Phantom of the Opera and his version of Dracula, which I've talked about on my other podcast, Astro Radio Z. Maybe I'll bring that on because I think it's due for a revisit. Maybe even Phantom of the Opera. We should go through this era of Dario Argento, mostly because, and this is going to be the tone today as well, I think they're very unjustly maligned. I may personally not like them, but there are fans of them out there. And it's rare that we as film viewers, even with workmanlike directors, and I would never call Dario Argento workmanlike director. It's easy for us to kind of just dismiss that stuff and allow the majority vote and majority voice to kind of dictate the worth of a certain filmography, right? When Giallo came out, and it's starring Adrian Brody in a way that most people completely dismissed it almost outright. When it came out, boy, did this thing get a negative reaction. And I got to be honest, I don't know why, but I also glommed onto that. For some reason, and maybe it was because, hotter tendencies towards ups and downs when you're younger with emotion and feeling and whatnot. But coming back to it for this episode, man, I was very excited because I haven't watched a Dario Argento movie in quite some time. And his last output, Black Glasses, was so good. And if you haven't seen it, please go. I think it's called Dark Glasses or Black Glasses. I forget which. I'm not looking it up right now. But if you haven't seen it, please do. It goes along the lines of his latter era Giallo, which I think, and I'm sorry if that's confusing because the movie we're talking about today is Giallo, but it's also a genre. It really goes along line with that and is so beautiful. Is so beautiful. So I was really excited to get back to this because I always felt like there was something there with this movie we're going to be talking about today. But there's a few things that derail it in a way that I could see people making a joke out of it. And I gotta be honest, I think that's unfair. There's a lot of times in my mind when I listen to film criticism or I just listen to the general timbre of, people's opinion on movies, I take it with a grain of salt because I think a lot of people, and we do this in just our general speech in any ways, right? Where we just embellish a little bit and maybe our actual voice is a little more muted than that. And I'm going to lay a shocker out there, but I've been that way with the Evil Dead remake since it came out. I know some listeners are going to be absolutely gobsmacked by this, but I recently in the last year rewatched the Evil Dead series with the remake. I had made a fan cut of it because I was so disappointed by it. And I found some fan edits of it. And I found one where it's like, oh, I actually kind of like this. And I took it and then fan edited that fan edit because I'm like, this is almost there where I think this could be. Because I always felt like the Evil Dead remake was a bit too pandery. And it a bit too lived in the home of like the Blumhouse era of like The Grudge and stuff like that, where it was just too over-explainy and shit like that. And I know this isn't about Evil Dead, but we'll get to it. Or this isn't about Giallo, we'll get to it. And upon rewatching this last year, I was like, oh, I actually really enjoyed that. the fan edit. So I was hoping, coming back to Giallo today, a film that I didn't necessarily like when I first watched it, that I would have the same feeling. So let's get to it. What is the plot of today's movie, Giallo, or if you look for it on Tubi, it's called Color of Fear? Made in 2001 by Maestro Dario Argento. Enzo, played by Adrian Brody, is on the case, attempting to take down a whippet-inhaling, pacifier-sucking, porno-loving, jaundiced taxi-driving serial killer who wants to destroy beautiful women in Italy. Yeah, that's a mouthful, isn't it? I mean, even though that sounds like a long-winded thing, and it's mostly just describing the killer in this movie, because if you're familiar with Giallo, you know it's a bunch of people are getting killed, and there's some mysterious killer that's taking them. And they're always, in these Dario Argento movies, quite ridiculous and over the top. But this is a fairly straight-laced procedural mixed with 2000 era kind of like it feels very informed by stuff like Hostel and stuff that was going on, which for better or worse is what it is. So it's kind of a different beast than the normal Giallo that you would see. My verdict upon rewatch, aside from the completely over the top killer, this is a completely enjoyable murder mystery that is thoroughly helped by having an artist with a keen sense of the cinematic medium at its helm. Dario Argento makes movies unlike anybody else. And when he hits, that tone and the visual is engrossing. And it will always get me. And this movie has that. You can sit and tell me that it doesn't, and I will look you straight face in the fucking eyes and tell you you're full of fucking shit, because it's there. If you've seen any of his work in the Giallo genre, I will call bullshit completely on that. While not one of his best Jolly, it works and is a decent enough watch. Fans of his Jolly may be disappointed a tad, but it fits into his like similar films he's done. I rank it with like Sleepless and Dark Glasses and Do You Like Hitchcock? All of those are films, as I said before, that I enjoyed. So I was super happy coming back to this and having the opinion that I did watching it. I really enjoyed watching this one, man. And I know a few of you out there who are looking forward to this episode are like, what the fuck? What are you doing? But guess what? Swerve! Let's get to the goods.
What is good?
I gotta be honest, this looks and feels like a Dario Argento movie. It's beautiful and it just absolutely flies by. This thing is pretty short. I think it's only like an hour and 25 minutes long or something like that. This thing flies the fuck by. It's just wonderful. The wonderful cinematography, good score. The Italian location is absolutely amazing as always. And the editing is really good in this. The pace also keeps you in. Mind you, I think there is a point towards like maybe a little past the midway point where things start to kind of slow down, mostly because of the structure of the movie, which starts as mostly a police procedural, then becomes almost like a buddy cop movie between one of the victim's sister, who Adrian Brody and her are trying to find this sister that is holed up in some subterranean layer by this completely ridiculous. Okay, I can't even go on about speaking about this until I spoil who the killer is. Spoilers.
This is a warning. Thank you.
Adrian Brody plays two roles in this movie. One is the cop, and one is this completely prosthetic up serial killer. And it's fucking ridiculous. And we'll talk about it a little bit more. But Murder Brody has this lady in a basement where he's been killing all these beautiful women because he's so ugly and he's jaundiced, and that's where Giallo or yellow in the title comes from. But as it gets to that point in the movie, it does slow down a tad, but I was invested. I was all the way in, and I was just so happy how effortless it was to watch this movie. Adrian Brody really, for the most part, is doing the best he can when he's given kind of really poorly written dialogue as the inspector. But there is that kind of this is a pretty Adrian Brody performance. I gotta say, he tries playing it cool. Which feels a little awkward at times, but once you get into the swing of it, I had no complaints with him as the inspector. We'll talk about his other role in a little bit here, but let's continue on with the goods. Also, I really enjoy the relationship between him and the sister that are kind of buddying up, trying to find the killer to save the sister. I enjoyed it. Also, in typical Argento fashion, when the violence happens, and this is also a little bit too, is really brutal Argento stuff. There's a bit of a tone change in this than the normal Argento stuff. As I told you before, this feels more informed by stuff like Hostel and all the stuff that was happening around the time. But it's still, when it hits. And of course, Argento doesn't shy the fuck away when it does. And my last good, because really, the majority of the movie I thought was really, really well made and really done. And I can't really go on and on and on about it. We'll talk about some things I wish was different in the plot, in the bads, but I kind of love as a plot point that Enzo doesn't start a romantic relationship with the sister, which would have been so easy in a film like this because they spend so much screen time and they kind of trauma bond over some things in the movie. And she tries to get him to spend the night, but he doesn't break his oath and his loyalty towards finding the sister. And also, he's kind of messed up in the head because of some events that happened, but they never go there. And honestly, I thought it was super refreshing because I think in a lot of times, let's just talk about the Children of the Corn 7 that we had talked about last episode, where, of course, the cop asks the lady that he's trying to help out on a date. That does not happen here. So I thought that was cool. I liked it. Let's get to the bads.
What is bad?
The movie opens up with the most stock, cheesy, After Effects heavy opening credits. And it feels like they had a template where they plunked in everybody's names. They were able to switch them out because it fades in from black to this really twitchy text thing, and then it fades out, and then it fades in again for the next one. And that's the entire credit sequence, and it feels cheap. It doesn't look great when the rest of the movie looks fairly elegant. We can't get away from what I had said before about Adrian Brody's double role in this movie. And unfortunately, I have to say, and I don't think it's completely awful, but Adrian Brody with the prosthetics they put on him looks absolutely fucking ridiculous as the killer in this movie. The character in general is just so over the top that it's kind of hard to take it seriously. I mean, unlike other Jolly that we watch, where the killer is mostly POV and you only see black leather gloves and breathing, and you kind of see things from their perspective and you don't learn about their motives or what they're attempting to do outside of the murder scenes until the very last act in the climax. This movie changes that in a way that Adrian Brody's killer character basically becomes one of the main characters, I would say a third of the way in. And for my tastes, honestly, especially in a movie called Giallo, where we kind of have a preconception as to how these movies work and the language of them, especially in the filmography of Dario Argento, because he stayed very true to a very specific path of how the murder mystery plays out in these films. This becomes more of like a serial killer character study in some ways. And I think it's for the worse, honestly. I think it would have been better if they had kept him in the shadows more and made him more mysterious instead of having him in basically flat light looking like fucking ridiculous pervert with fucking hentai mags and sucking on pacifiers, beating off and all sorts of. It's so fucking unbelievably ridiculous. And I mean, it was a conscious choice, and obviously deviated away from the norm. But I thought that it was a bad move, and because the character becomes so explicit and such a known presence, complete with a backstory halfway through, and including things during the backstory he wouldn't remember as he was an infant when they happened, but we get footage of them. This is kind of my main bad of the movie. And I think back in the day when this first came out, and I would probably say, and please let me know in the comments if this is how you feel as well, or how you felt when you initially watched this movie. I think this is the main criticism of the movie as well, is this Brody killer character, because it's way over the top. So if there's anything that's really going to turn you off, because I thought the rest of the movie was just fine, this character is ridiculous. It's fucking it's ridiculous, unbelievable. Unlike other Argento films, and I said this movie gets fairly violent. There's a good portion of this movie where it cuts away from the violence quite a bit, and I was a little shocked. So there's that, and the buddy cop angle of this movie, much like his first movie, Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Why would a department allow a civilian so close to the case in on an investigation? And I think the argument could be made that Brody was working outside of the bounds of the department by bringing her in. And I think that's some of the story. But if they found out she was attached to the actual investigation of this, I think he would be in deep shit. Like, it doesn't make it really any sense why that would be happening. One scene that I got to nitpick. And there's one victim, one of the first victims that are taken by Killer Brody is a Japanese lady, and she escapes, and they find her, and Brody kind of records, the investigator, Brody, Enzo, records her final words on a tape deck, and they're in Japanese. So he takes this recording to a person to translate. And when we sit and go through that scene, there's like 2 to 3 times more dialogue there than was in the actual scene. Like, what the fuck? What's going on? That should have probably been in the what the fucks, but it was just so stupid. It's like, come on, man. You know, we just watched it. She didn't say all this. And I gotta be honest, the movie kind of ends in a very unsatisfying way. Like, when all is said and done, Brody kind of walks away shamed from the sister berating him, calling him nothing better than the killer. And there's some rando security guard that ends up finding the sister, because at the end, spoilers.
This is a warning. Thank you.
They kill Killer Brody before they find the sister, and the sister that was working with him hates his fucking guts because her sister might be dead. And Brody, who's been doing nothing but the honorable thing and trying to, like, not only find this killer because of his own personal motivations, but try to do right by her and avenge her, it ends up just walking away, his head hung in shame because he didn't do the job. But then we get almost like an epilogue scene where some rando security guard in a parking garage hears the sister in the killer's car because he's dead. He's not coming back to the car. Hears her banging around in there and discovers her. So I thought it was just like, oh my God. Very unsatisfying way for the movie to end. Let's get to the what the fucks.
What the fuck is that?
I know it's a very typical practice with movies that are distributed internationally, but why was this retitled on Tubi? I don't understand what the fuck that's all about, because honestly, maybe it was a keyword thing, or I don't know. Maybe they thought they could market it a little better. But Color of Fear, what a weak ass title. I found Giallo a much better title to this movie, and it makes sense, even though it's a little corny because of its direct reference to plot elements. But I don't know. I didn't like that title whatsoever, and I had to double check when I looked it up because I had the DVD, but I wanted to see if it was streaming in HD. And there it was on Tubi, and I watch Tubi all the time. I love it. I think it's a great platform. Next, what the fuck? So the lady that I talked about, that the Japanese lady that spits out all these clues right before she dies, has her throat slit. How in the fuck is she talking? And then my final what the fuck of this movie is what I kind of alluded to before, where Killer Brody has a pacifier looking at porn and beating off at a computer. And it's just so over the top and so unnecessary. I mean, Argento has shied away from sexuality in his movies in the past. I mean, by any means. But this just seemed so ridiculous that it was kind of like, a little less is more in this scenario, because it already, the deck is stacked against this character just because of how ridiculous it looks. And that we know it's Adrian Brody. And now we have this ridiculous looking Adrian Brody beating off, sucking a pacifier to like hentai snuff porn. So all you could do is roll your eyes and kind of giggle at it. But that's what I got for Giallo, an experience where I walked away finally liking this movie. I'm as shocked as you guys. I actually really enjoyed this. And I'll probably watch it again down the road. And I hope you guys, especially those of you out there that have seen this before, give it another chance. That's all I can say. Give it another fucking chance. All right? Please? Promise? Anyways, next episode of Worst Movies Ever, I am having a very special guest come on. Those of you who listen to my old podcast, Astro Radio Z, will know who this individual is, because not only did I interview him, we reviewed one of his witchcraft movies. Yeah, that's right. Mel House is back on the podcast, coming here to talk about, and we're going to break down, his debut shot on video film, Fade to Black. It's a first for my podcast. I've talked about doing this kind of thing in the past, but never got to go through with it. Well, we recorded an interview and a breakdown, classic Worst Movies Ever style, with Mel House about Fade to Black. So look forward to that next week, guys. And until then, take care of yourself. And please be kind to Giallo. It deserves more credit than most of you motherfuckers have given it. Adios.
Worst Movies Ever podcast is executive produced by Vaughn Koolmeyer and Shannon Smith. For more Worst Movies Ever, and to make the Doctor watch your worst movies ever, subscribe to the Worst Movies Ever Patreon at patreon.com/Worst Movies Ever. There you will get a monthly exclusive WME podcast plucked from the user-generated film list, randomized episode to episode. Until next time, celebrate trash at all costs. Toodles.